I've spoken of 1,000 points of light, of all the community organizations that are spread like stars throughout the nation doing good. I will go to the people and the programs that are the brighter points of light, and I'll ask every member of my government to become involved. The old ideas are new again because they're not old. They are timeless. Duty, sacrifice, commitment, and a patriotism that finds its expression in taking part and pitching in.
And joining me now, Democrat Michelle Nunn, former Points of Light CEO. She is the daughter of former Georgia Senator Sam Nunn. Also with me, Republican Ken Blackwell. He served Bush 41 as the HUD Undersecretary and U.S. Ambassador to the UN Human Rights Commission. Very glad to have you both here to talk about this president's legacy. And I'll go to you first, Michelle, because the Points of Light project, if you will, was a very near and dear entity to the president's heart. So as you reflect on your work with him and the message that he wanted to convey, what are you feeling?
Yeah, well, I'm feeling a real sense of celebration of an extraordinary public servant. I had the opportunity to be the CEO of Points of Light as a Democrat working with President George H.W. Bush across party lines, but on a transcendent idea, which is that he so well articulated that the definition of a successful life must include service to others. And he spoke of a constellation of people who serve and make a difference in this world. And I think it was really at the core of who he was, both in terms of his macro professional career and also in terms of the way that he lived his life with a spirit of graciousness and generosity. And so I'm grateful for that life today. You know,
Michelle, it is said that to whom much is given, much is expected. Do you think that in part is why he was so passionate about volunteerism? I understand he began that even while a student at Yale as an undergrad.
Yeah, I think it was very much a part of his DNA. It was a part of his heritage. You know, he spoke often of his mother and his father's example. He impressed upon everyone who he met about the virtue of humility, and I think that went along with the spirit of service. And it was truly a part of who he was. And you can see it how he passed that on to his children and his grandchildren now. They're really, it is a part of the fabric of the Bush legacy and of the Bush family. And again, it was a part of his personal interaction with people as well. Well,
there is perhaps no finer legacy than that, and passing that on throughout his family's generations. Ken, I know that you were an undersecretary in Bush 41's cabinet. This was in 1989, and we have some pictures of the two of you together that we're going to put up right there. What are you thinking about him today?
Well, President Bush was a man who lived his life in what the Jesuits call in service to others. He was a man of dignity. He was a man that had a quiet but deep faith. And he was, I think, it gets not underscored enough, he was a man of great courage. He was not afraid to take risk. He was not afraid to take the risk of reaching across the line in order, the political lines, in order to get something done. I think he, in fact, he punched holes in the darkness of our times, and he has left us with not only a legacy but an example of what we need to get us through these more contentious times. We have some challenges as a country that's in front of us that we must reach across the lines and get things done, from criminal justice to infrastructure to beating back the scourge of opioids.
What about working with him on housing policy, Ken? What do you think was his biggest accomplishment at HUD?
Well, he in fact had Jack Kemp as his undersecretary, and so Jack would take us into areas that historically Republicans didn't venture. And he had the full support of President Bush. And if you take a look at what happened during his term, housing ownership among those who had historically been left out actually was on the increase. And so he always was one who supported those efforts to make American culture more inclusive, and he was really an advocate, a cheerleader for civic engagement and participation by all Americans.
So to both of you, his legacy, as you see it, how he will be remembered through the ages. Michelle, to you first.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many dimensions of his legacy, from foreign policy to the Disabilities Act, American with Disabilities Act. But I think ultimately his life itself was an embodiment of his legacy, and that was a life that that truly did embody public service, the transcendent values of giving, of recognizing that ultimately our life's journey is not about power or wealth, which he had plenty of, or even glory, but really about what we do for others. And I think that that is at the heart of his legacy, and that it fueled his accomplishments and his achievements, and is a great example of what we need today.
Ken, to you.
Look, he was a man of quiet dignity. He was tough-minded, but he was tender-hearted. He, again, was a man who loved his family, but lived his life in the service of others beyond his family. His example of being a person who rapidly, day in and day out, closed the gap that might exist between what he professed to believe and how he behaved. He closed that gap. He lived his values, and as a consequence, not only was his family stronger, but America was stronger and more in keeping with the American ideal.
And we very much miss him already in these troubling times some days. Michelle Nunn and Ken Blackwell, thank you both for joining me and sharing your insights.